We've got a big week coming up in real estate, and I want to get a couple of items out in front of you. So what is going on this week? If you remember, there was a lawsuit and a settlement against the National Association of Realtors, and a lot of it had to do with transparency in commissions. And the impact of that lawsuit and the requirements are going to be going into effect on August 17th. So in today's Tom's Take, what I want to do is review with you what this means for both a buyer and a seller, so you can help basically develop a strategy, whether you're buying or selling or both, to understand the new requirements, what it means to you as a buyer or seller, so you can put together the best strategy possible. So just quickly, I'm going to go over historically what brought about part of the suit anyway, and it has to do with what was called the lack of transparency. And going back to the 1990s, when a person went to sell their home, they would speak to their realtor, their agent, and they would establish two different numbers. They would establish a listing agent commission, what they're going to pay their listing agent to market and sell their home. And they would establish something called a buyer's agent commission, what they would compensate the buyer's agent for selling the home. And yes, historically, the seller paid the buyer's agent off their side of the transaction, even though the agent represented the buyer. And this is where the rub came into being, that there was a lack of transparency, that people thought that buyers weren't really aware of how much their buyer's agents are being paid, and that maybe they weren't being fully negotiated. So the new requirements going forward, I'm going to start with the seller side, just because it's going to make a little more sense when I talk about it. Going forward, starting on August 17th, the seller is no longer going to offer a buyer's agent commission. Now, that doesn't mean that the seller is not going to help compensate for a buyer's agent, but it means they're no longer going to establish that commission ahead of time in their listing agreement, and it's no longer going to be in the multiple listing service. But as a seller, you're going to want to keep some things in mind, because expect that a buyer is probably going to ask for some sort of credit or assistance in paying their buyer's agent. It's going to come in a little bit different form. So now let's go over to the buyer side of it and talk about what that's going to look like. Historically, if you're a buyer, you could contact someone. They would go show you houses, and you could work with people, and they would then write an offer for you. Usually there was no agreement in place about how that worked. That's actually a little bit scary, because there's a whole different level of experience with buyer's agents from just a wide variety, and you want to make sure you're working with someone good. So what this is going to require, the new going forward, if you're going to be working with an agent, you need to have an agreement with that agent, and that agreement's going to be kind of like a listing agent. It's a listing agreement. It's going to talk about your buyer's agent's responsibility to you, what they're responsible to do, their services they're going to provide, and how they're going to get paid. So going forward, this agreement is going to be between you and your buyer's agent. The buyer's agent has to have that in place by law, by the new requirements, before they can show you a house. But it's not as scary as it sounds, because there are different ways to structure these agreements. You can structure them for a single property. You can structure them for a given period of time. So you have some flexibility there. And as a buyer, you're agreeing to pay your agent X amount of money. It may be a flat fee, or it may be a percentage of the purchase price of the home. And it'll be clearly stated in that agreement. So now going forward, what this all means is, when buyers are writing offers on homes, they have the ability, and often will be, requesting some sort of credit or compensation from the seller to help them offset or cover their costs of their buyer's agent, to help them pay that fee. And that's going to be another negotiating point, just as asking for closing costs or asking for other types of things in the transaction will be. So it's another piece of the transaction, of the negotiations, will be how to handle the buyer's agent's fee, and how the buyer is going to be able to compensate their agent, how the seller is going to help compensate the buyer for those costs. So expect that as a seller, buyers are going to be asking you to help them offset their buyer's agent fees. As a buyer, understand you're now going to be paying your buyer's agent, but you'll have the ability to go negotiate that with the seller. So important things to understand, because it may very well change your strategy. And I also want to talk about, I think it's super important as a buyer, you're going to want to really make sure you have a buyer's agent that has a lot of experience, that has a lot of knowledge, that has a lot of, is going to really be able to help you. And as a buyer's agent, a big part of my job is going to be help show my value to you of my years of experience, my relationships that I have with lenders, title companies, and how that helps you out. So you're going to want to be asking your buyer's agent, potential buyer's agents, a lot of questions before just signing an agreement with them. So I would, encourage you to, think about that. I would love to talk to you more about, if you're a home buyer, about things you should be thinking about. Reach out to me here on social media. Reach out to our team at Ask Guile Group at guilegroup.com. We can provide you that information. As a seller, again, the same thing. It's changing the strategy. It's important to understand it. So reach out to us here. We'd love to have those conversations and help you navigate and really benefit from these changes moving forward.